Well, we're obviously going to be talking about the work of the Family Resource Centres on the ground. So I'm going to come to Eileen first. One of the themes that came through very strongly was sort of the collective and doing things together, and how that gives a sense of real empowerment and does empower communities and individuals then within that. You were telling me earlier about the Lunar Festival, which is celebrated every year, and it was featured in the video this year was Year of the Rabbit. Can you tell me how that festival, as an example of kind of empowering communities and individuals, works?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Kitty. I suppose it was nearly 8 or 9 years ago in Hill Street. We had quite a large Hill Street, first of all, is an intercultural family centre. It has about 31 different nationalities who come to the centre. We're based in the heart of Dublin 1, where there's a lot of rented accommodation. So you find a lot of migrant, ethnic, minority families live in the rented accommodation, often very poor accommodation, and most of our families would work, shift work, and be on very low incomes. So I suppose there was a large cohort of Chinese families in the centre, and as we do in family resource centres, we sat down with them and we consulted with them and asked them, was there anything particular that we could do with those families? We had identified Chinese children were being bullied because they're easily identified as being Chinese, and also the Chinese children had lower confidence, and I suppose it was because of being identified as Chinese and being bullied. So we sat down with the parents, and what they said was that they felt there was a need to build their children's confidence. So again, like we said earlier, we undertook a little bit of research into how do you build the confidence of children from ethnic minority backgrounds. And what we found was that it was around identity and belonging. So we supported the families to start a group where they were passing on their skills and traditions and encouraging the children to learn about their Chinese heritage and Chinese culture. And by doing that, it made the children feel more confident in where they had come from. And it also started to look at the link between China and Ireland. As the children will grow up, they're Chinese when they're 2 and 3, but they 100% become Chinese Irish when they're older. So we looked at that. They held weekly sessions. We did a piece of artwork with them where I learned that process wasn't the most important thing, which I had believed up until then. But actually the end result and what was going to be exhibited was really important to our Chinese families, that looked perfect. And that was a new learning for me, because I always thought it's all about the process, whereas actually community development is actually about what the people want and not what I understood it to mean. They asked could they celebrate the Lunar New Year. At the time it was called the Chinese New Year, and we have a room in our centre. It's quite a large room, so we invited people in and celebrated the New Year. The families learned skills, then they became leaders. They exhibited their own culture. That grew from 80 people 8 years ago to 5,500 people this year on Hill Street. Brilliant. So we moved, as it grew, we moved. The skills, I suppose, that the parents developed over the years were they were spokespeople, they went on radio, they went on TV. The children became really confident. The children actually had opportunities in schools because other children saw them. They started to tell the story. We then ran an intercultural, we linked with the schools. Each year the schools then held workshops where we got families trained up to go in and deliver the workshops in the schools. So I think in terms of a community development approach, and I think earlier Duggan asked what was the consistent message that we should be giving as family resource centres, and I think it's that we have a really strong community development approach. I don't think we need to sell our work. I think we have a strong approach, and that should be our message, and that's quite consistent, I think, across the FRCs. I have no idea if I've answered your question, Katie.
You have, and it sounds like it was great for the kids, which, starting at the back, in terms of their sense of self and their sense of stake in the community and pride, and as beacons of a cultural asset kind of thing within the community. And Justina, coming to you, in your presentation, you talked a lot about blow-ins and sense of place and sense of belonging and that kind of thing. Can you talk just a little bit about how important it is for people to have that sense of place and belonging, and I suppose then, to feel that they have a stake in the community and something to offer, like the Chinese kids in a way. Yeah.
So as I mentioned in the presentation, there is no place, as community center in Trim, and it kind of, it was brought to me on so many occasions that people, need that place to go to where they can, they feel they belong, and then somehow, the Trim FRC is, although it's very small, it has become that space where people, feel where they can kind of come in and they know that they can be themselves, that they can, ask the questions and maybe, reach out for supports or, together with others in the group, work towards, putting on a new program. And what struck me, when we were doing the toy show video, one of the kids, Ryan, he's like 10, and we had to stand outside of the door when he was doing his, when he's being interviewed in the room with all the cameras and and the equipment there. So we had to stay in the total silence, and that was one of the things that he mentioned. That it's just like he feels like he's belonging somewhere, and to hear that from a kid. Yeah. I think it speaks volume that, we all need to have that, the sense of belonging, somewhere to go, somewhere to share, whether sometimes it's just, it's a walk, but sometimes a chat, it's meeting people, it's having that cup of tea together with another person.
The cup of tea is very important. Yeah, but and also then for that sense of, I suppose, if you have a sense of belonging and a sense of, I am valued here, then you feel you can give back. If you feel you don't belong, you feel isolated, you feel you're not wanted. I suppose it's that symbiosis, isn't it, between feeling you belonging and being able to give back, which then develops the community and empowers the community.
And I've seen, we have seen this, since I've seen so many times in, since I started in Trim Family Resource Centre, just people might come in for one thing, but when they're leaving, they have maybe a whole new skill set. And then they give it back to the community. So we had, maybe somebody who's coming in on the TUS scheme and he does not have a notion about, what we do in the FRC program. And then a year later, they're actually upskilled and they volunteer with the youth club.
Yeah.
So, just seeing that how the community can be upskilled and, people can give back then, and kind of having that ripple effect that was mentioned earlier.
Like Vima in Hillside, your colleague who came in as a mother and
Yeah, and now she's a food manager. Yeah, so that's, that ripple effect that, and again, it's not just the fact, it's not having an impact on just that one person, but also, as she spoke, in that video, it's having an impact on the family.
And Leanne, we heard a lot about regionalisation today and making decisions as close as possible to the front line. In many ways, the FRCs have always been about this. In terms of local voluntary directors and the importance of regional structure within the national programme, can you tell us a bit more about that?
I suppose there's probably a balance to be struck in terms of the local and the regional piece, and then obviously our own national programme and that model and framework that we work from. But yeah, FRCs, that's how we work. We're led by community, we're needs-led. The centres really, the shape of the centre, the work that the centre does is informed by your local community, and that is obviously run by your voluntary board of management, and that's made up then of a cross-section of members of your local community, and they govern the organisation. And I suppose in recent years, the burden for them in terms of that has become a lot greater, and it has become more difficult with governance and compliance and that side of things. So there is a degree of support needed for boards and for your local volunteers in being able to do that. And I suppose the essence of family resource centres, it isn't alone your local boards of management, but it's all the way through. So for us, say in Westport, we have nearly 50 volunteers.
Yeah.
So I suppose that enhances so much the capacity of what we do. It enhances the delivery and the number of people that we can support and the needs that we can meet. And then just in terms of the regional side of it, for me, the regional structures are so crucial and so important. I'm involved in the programme with the last 5 years, and I can honestly say that when I came into the programme, if it wasn't for that regional structure and been part of that, I don't know how I would have managed, because there was a huge amount of change as well at that time, back in 2018. Huge changes were happening, and to have that support and coming together for information sharing, collaboration, idea generation and networking, and being able to be more strategic then in what we're doing and coming together and feeding up the issues and what's going on the ground for FRCs then into our national forum is really is crucial.
And Shauna, you're on the national forum as well. Can you talk as well about how that national feeds into the local and the sort of collective again, I suppose, that issue?
Yeah, I suppose, well, our key work within the National Forum, I think it was 5 years ago, we were in Dublin Castle. We were presenting on just the suicide prevention work, which is a key part of the local family resource centres. And we have really grown over the last number of years. We had a team of, I think it was 1.5 at the time, and now we're a team of 9. And that is responding to the needs on the ground. So the various different issues that are coming through the regional networks and also from the national as well. So I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that we're actually working on because, suicide prevention was a key area of work for so long. We have evolved and grown beyond that. We are now working in social prescribing in Cork and Kerry. We have gone from 6 social prescribing sites to 10 social prescribing sites, and there's actually 30 plus family resource centres delivering social prescribing across the country. And also the forum is involved now, and I suppose this need is coming up through the local, is in problem gambling. And it is a growing issue within our communities. And we have now been funded by the Gambling Awareness Trust to provide across 20 family resource centres therapeutic supports to people who are experiencing harmful gambling and their affected others. So I suppose although we're working at a national level, all of this stuff is being fed up through the regional structures and what are the needs emerging on the ground. And it's fantastic that we've been able to tap into resources from the HSC and from the Gambling Awareness Trust in order to provide supports at the FRC level as well.
Okay. Yeah. And Jackie, you're due to take over as a chairperson of the FRC National Programme. Where do you see things going over the next, say, 2 to 5 years when you're hearing about the issues that are coming from across the country? What's your...
I suppose I'm really excited about it. I think there are lots of opportunities there. I think having a dedicated staff team has really professionalised us. Because before that we were doing it as members of the board and already either being on our voluntary boards locally or being managers locally, and that was a real challenge. Having dedicated professional staff is a huge advantage to what we're doing. I suppose, where do I see us going forward? There's obviously some challenges in that. There's some challenges around regionalisation, there are some challenges around other organisations. Maybe sometimes we are a victim of our own success, in that other organisations see the value in family resource centres, and there can be a tendency for some work to be dumped on family resource centres without being adequately additionally resourced for that.
And who would do that dumping?
Well, I don't know very well. I'd say most people sitting in the room would have a couple on their list around that, It's a challenge. It's not a challenge that can't be overcome. And it does take, collaboration and discussions. And I think it's important for us to remember it is okay to say no, that we have to work within the resources we have. And I suppose then we look at areas like, if you look at with the pandemic and the Ukrainian crisis, what was the first thing that happened? The first announcement was that there was going to be response forums set up throughout the country, primarily led by the councils and by the local development companies. And that's all well and good. I think we were a little bit forgotten about in the pandemic. But I know definitely in my area in North Kerry and Listowel, I've had to do a little bit of foot stamping to ensure that we were at the forefront in relation to the Ukrainian crisis. But I will say, and I think everyone here will agree with it, that while it was the councils and the local development companies that were kind of put in charge of leading out the response, I would ask the question, who really led it out? I think it was really the family resource centres. We were the ones that they came to first, And I suppose we have to remember as well, while we're responding to those 2 significant crises, it was really important. But what about all the other work we were doing? We didn't ditch that. We didn't push that to one side. We're still dealing with all the other issues and challenges within our community, be it addiction, be it domestic violence, mental health. an elderly person living on their own. The granny's upset because her son's marriage is breaking down and will she see her grandchildren? You know, our LGBT community, cost of living crisis. Transgender healthcare is a huge, huge issue. Like Daniel said, we're very progressive in terms of our LGBT legislation in Ireland, but our transgender healthcare system is appalling and has to be tackled. So all of those issues are still going on while we're responding to this. And may I add, with little or no additional resources. So I think we all need to be commended for that.
Do you think the family resource centres get forgotten about a bit in terms of policy and pronouncements on the media? And we hear a lot about what Tusla's doing and what Bernardo's is doing and what X, Y, and Z is doing, but you very rarely actually hear about the work.
Yeah. I do think we get forgotten about. I think within our local communities, I think our local media and our local newspapers are very good to us as family resource centres and are really quite open to promoting work we're doing or promoting new initiatives, you know, and I think that works really well on a local level. But I do agree with you. I think in terms of a national level, I would like to see, and maybe it's one of our ambition, and I know as a forum and as all of us being members, we've talked about it for years, but now with our dedicated professional staff, hopefully we can move it forward. I'd love us to be seen as a go-to voice for when issues happen to the community, that RTE are contacting us, that Virgin Media are contacting us, you know, the Irish Times are contacting us, you know. I would like to see that happen. I think it's important, and I think we are absolutely experts at what's happening on the ground.
You have your toes and fingers in everything, you know what's going on. Yeah.
But I do think that is changing now, you know. I think funders are beginning to realise that actually there's a unique opportunity here. Where else would you have 121 centres with easy access to people who they want to reach? Yeah. And where the FRCs are trusted within their community, you know, that funders are beginning, the penny has dropped, and we're seeing that now.
Okay, Andrew, I'll come to you. You know, you've come from the United States, where, as you say, there's 3,000 FRCs, and there's a long history of the tradition going back to the turn of the 20th century. What would be your perspectives or reflections on what you're hearing here today, and what can we maybe learn, what you could learn from the Irish experience, and maybe the Irish FRCs could look to you?
Sure. Well, I'd say first, in terms of what we learned from you, we're very impressed at how quickly you've come together and how quickly you've moved since hiring your first staff. So your staff size is actually double our staff size. So you moved very fast with that, and our work is slightly different. So there's a logic to that, where the state networks have staff as well in our system. But I think it's very impressive how you've worked to raise visibility. So I remember during the pandemic how you had that candle campaign, and everyone had candles, and you posted it all, and I saw it in the United States, right? And we talked about that with our folks, because our work, especially without that federal funding, is so under the radar. We talk about it as America's best kept secret. And I hope your work is better known than ours is, but I also think there are more opportunities to shine a light on it further. I'll tell you, for example, our experience with the standards, working with our elected officials, that there's a very obvious, clear before and after. So before going to talk with elected officials about the work and saying, well, there's this good program over here and there's this good program over here, but don't look so closely over that direction, right? And then once we had standards that everyone was using, everyone was trained on, the funders used to monitor the programs, et cetera, the families themselves used the standards to say what their experience was like with the programs. It was a night and day difference talking with our elected officials. And I'll tell you, I don't think they cared so much what was in the standards, but the fact that we had standards meant something. And to your point about professionalization, definitely put our field in a class of professionalized field, like many others that are professional, like education has standards and social workers have standards, but our field didn't. So that's been a big step forward. So.
Okay. Sorry, Kitty, can I just say, I suppose, I think the promotion and the PR piece is really, really important, especially in the era that we're in. But as Eileen has already said, we know that this works, and we know that on the ground it's having an impact, and we know that families and communities benefit. And when someone comes in the door of either the FRC in Westport or wherever it may be, and they're really struggling, and they might be a bit broken and really vulnerable, and 6 months, 12 months down the line, they're a new person, their family life is different, things have improved for them. They might join us in volunteering. They might then go on to be on our board of management. You can see it in front of your eyes. So I think we having a voice and having a profile is really important, but we also know that it works, and it's maybe not about selling ourselves. And also we have to recognise that sometimes people that are using our centres, you know, that anonymity and that privacy and confidentiality is so important. So maybe people aren't going around shouting about the fact that they're in there, but they're still getting the support that they need.
Yeah, but I suppose in today's age, in terms of accessing the funding and especially from
And there is
government
that
and
side,
everything,
absolutely.
you have to tell your story and sell yourself. Like, it's kind of irritating, I'd say, you know, but everyone's at it because they have to, you know. Yeah.
And Kitty, can I just come back in as well, just to kind of say as well, I suppose days like today, and seeing all the examples of the work that happen within family resource centres really reminds us the importance of us being a national family resource centre programme. We're the longest standing national programme left in the country, and we need to remain as that. You know, and I suppose we're ingrained in government policy as a programme, you know, and it's very clear that our work is from cradle to grave, and unfortunately sometimes beyond the grave, because of the grief that's left behind, whether it be a parent that's died by suicide or a grandparent that's left an important unit. It's all really, really important. And I suppose I would like to say that, as well as the examples that we saw through the speakers, you know, throughout the day, I would say to anyone that I would not let anyone tell me or tell any of us that examples like the Mount View Zumba Goldies and the Connecting Voices Choir is not family support using the heart of community development approach.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking when I was watching the Zumba and everything, I mean, it might look like just a dance class, but actually it's
so much more involved.
So, as you say, it's bringing people the collective, it's empowering people as a community and as individuals.
And their well-being.
And their well-being, and their mental well-being, their physical well-being, their social well-being, everything. Yeah. It was very moving, actually. I suppose we'll be wrapping up now. If anyone wants to or doesn't want to, Eileen, you don't have to speak. If anyone wants to make some concluding remarks, will I come to you, Andrew, first?
Oh, goodness. To let you know how impressed we are with your work in the States, and that we know about it, and also that there are many from the Irish diaspora who are very involved in our work. One of our co-founders is named Brenda McChesney. The current chair of our steering committee is Gail Nolan. So know that your treasures are well placed in this work in the U.S. as well. Yes, your work is wonderful, and we see ya, and you're gorgeous.
So are you. Eileen?
Yeah, Kitty, I think I'll steal Deirdre Duffy's words earlier. She said our work was strategic. I'm going to say endearing now, following the comments rather than enduring, but our work was strategic, enduring, impactful, and created great change. And I think that's really strong. I think we have to remember that we pass on skills of critical thinking, of social analysis. You know, we don't run little programs. We are a cup of tea place, there is no doubt. But the skills that we pass on to our families change lives and communities, which is, I think, really, really important.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And then society, you know. Yeah. Justine?
Thanks, Kitty.
I think it's important to, you know, it's fantastic to have the 25-year celebration of the FRC program. And I mean, also, like being 7 years part of my life, I see exactly how many lives have been changed, even maybe though they mightn't have been in the newspapers or the headlines, but they're out there. But I think it's just important to mention, I suppose, the funding part, and you know, it was great to hear from the funders and you know the philanthropy donors, like that funding part to retain, I think, to retain staff, you know, to continue that work. I think it's hugely important going forward.
Okay. There's no one for the Department of Taoiseach still here, I don't know, but if there are, you've heard it here. Leanne?
I suppose just again, it's a really great opportunity. It's a fantastic event to celebrate 25 years. As I had said in the presentation, I was just maybe 3 or 4 months in post when the 20th anniversary was celebrated in Dublin Castle, and in 5 years, so much has changed. So much has changed, I suppose, in our own centre there, and that's the thing as well about the centres and this whole programme and the network. We don't stand still. We're constantly changing, and we're constantly reevaluating what we're doing and ensuring that we're doing it well and that we're meeting the needs. And I suppose a lot of things have been added. We know we've added staff, we've added new programmes, new pieces of work. There's new links made and new collaborations and partnerships, and that's really important. I hope we continue to do that. But likewise, I hope that the enhancement of the programme and the sustainability of the programme is a priority going forward for our own forum and also for those, the policymakers and the funders.
Okay, Sean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's a really exciting time to be part of a staff team.
Yeah.
From being on my own for quite some time to now having a full suite of people I can ask support from is absolutely incredible. I suppose we are being approached by lots of funders for various different programs, and we have to realise that we can only do so much. And I'm conscious that we don't lose that community development part of our work. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. What about yourself, Jackie?
Yeah, I suppose just to follow on from Shona to say, with our new strategic plan, we look forward to continue working with the All-Ireland Endorsement Body for Community Work Education and Training and the Community Work Ireland in ensuring that the All-Ireland standards for community development are fully embedded. And they will help to underpin our family support practices and our pillars of mental wellness and well-being as well. So it's really important that they're incorporated around the standards that Andrew was talking about. And I suppose just finally for me, I just want to say that I want to thank all the previous boards of the National Forum, all the previous chairs, particularly my colleague Louise, who's handing over the mantle this week. I hope I do you proud, Louise. So yeah, just thank you, everybody.
Okay. Well, listen, thank you very much for having me here today. I've really enjoyed it. I found it really inspiring, really moving, actually, and I've actually learned a lot. I suppose I was part of the audience that didn't realise how much work, which I'm to my shame. But I'll come to you now for...
You can write about us, Katie.
Yeah, well, I will now. I'll come to you now more for the on-the-ground feel for what's going on. And thanks a million.
Yes,
Katie.